Hey there, and welcome to Red Hat Enterprise Linux uh, product announcements. This is our second official one of these. I'm really excited. We're looking in 2024 to make these more of a quarterly thing. We'll bring you updates on Satellite, Identity Manager, and of course, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Uh, by the way, I'm your host, Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and this isn't my usual platform, so not my usual response. Anyway, uh, in case you may notice, I'm wearing a RHEL 8 shirt today, and that is because probably by the time this broadcast ends, we will be looking at um, the official public release of RHEL 8.9. So I'm really excited that that's coming to be. And if you missed it, last week was RHEL 9.3. So we've got lots of exciting things going on here in the Red Hat Enterprise Linux world. And today our topic is to talk about what's new in those two releases. So I'm really excited to bring those features to you. And so why don't we dive in? We've got a ton of content to cover. And so I'm flying solo today. But I think Scott McBrien and maybe a couple of my other co-hosts will be in the chat answering questions, and I'll try to address some of the higher level questions at the end. So this isn't our usual interview style. If you're used to tuning in for Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents, today is going to be very much slide focused, but hope you find this helpful regardless. So we are talking about RHEL 9.3 and 8.9. I'm, of course, Eric, the IT Guy Hendricks. So I kind of went out of order, but that's what happens when I present. So today we're going to talk about the technical updates. So if you're a systems administrator, or developer, or engineer of any sort, you'll get the meat right up front. We'll talk a little bit about the product lifecycle and some things to expect, especially coming up in 2024, and some additional resources that you can tune into. But if you're a regular here on the RHEL YouTube channel, you'll already be familiar with a lot of the platforms and programs that we offer. So let's get into it. Technical updates. What is the meat in Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9.3? So installation. This is one of my favorite topics, as a lot of you know. Red Hat Enterprise Linux Image Builder is sort of the future. It's where we're driving towards as far as the installation experience. Of course, there's nothing that beats a good Anaconda install, but Image Builder is an amazing tool. You can host it on a local server somewhere in the cloud, or you can use the Red Hat Insights Image Builder, which is sort of a hosted solution that allows you to build out images, define your blueprints, and build out QCOW2 files or VMDKs, a multitude of options from file system configurations to users and SSH keys. And especially on the Red Hat Insights Image Builder, we can add, it's a hosted service that we here at Red Hat manage. So it gets a lot of new features. We don't have to wait for the 6-month minor release cycle for RHEL in order to get those updates. So Red Hat Insights Image Builder at console.redhat.com. It's an amazing tool, and there's an easy toggle switch in the top for preview mode, so you can see what features are coming. As well as VMDKs, QCOW2s, cloud cloud images like Amazon, Oracle, Google Cloud, and Azure. We've now added support for OVA images. That stands for VMware's Open Virtualization Archives. So we've got OVA image support now for Image Builder, as well as if you're slightly obsessive compulsive like me, we now support VMware vSphere template libraries and subfolders. So not only can you produce VMware compatible images, but you can also organize them right from Image Builder. Also, if you're on AWS, we now have hybrid boot support. We're supporting both UEFI and legacy BIOS. So lots of great incremental improvements. Of course, last release back in the spring, we added things like security certification support. So now you can build a more compliant image right out of the box. So tons of features. We've got labs for it in lab.redhat.com, and of course, content all over the place, from blogs to YouTube videos to dive in deeper into those features. Speaking of compliance, if I could characterize the epitome of Red Hat Enterprise Linux progress, it would be on our security front. Now, you'll notice in the next couple of slides, there's not a flagship feature. There's not anything to immediately go back to your office and change all the things, when in reality, it is methodical, it is incremental improvements and minor tweaks to make the experience better. And I'm really excited to see our security tooling be at that level where every release you don't have to go and break your infrastructure to place it with something new. For instance, like on our certification front, FIPS, we now have FIPS support in RHEL 8.6 for all user space modules. They are now validated, so you can use RHEL 8.6 even more so with FIPS compliance, as well as RHEL 9 has improved disastig support. So if you're in a government environment or something, you've got that, and you've got mandated use of disastig. My furry coworker just decided to come down and brush my leg. The joys of working from home, right? Anyway, RHEL 9 disastig, it's released for all mandated use, especially in government environments. Also on the identity front, really excited to say that we've got IMA, Integrity Management Architecture support now, to be used with Secure Boot. Basically, that verifies that system RPMs have not been tampered with. So it'll check to make sure that, say, the checksum of your RPMs and the binaries have not been altered in any way since the previous boot. So that's really, really huge in our confidential computing, and especially with our zero trust architecture strategy. Also in Tech Preview, this is really cool. If you're running Identity Manager with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, now in Tech Preview, hopefully in the next release or two, we'll see identity management support for OAuth 2. So if you have a platform that's using OAuth 2, whether it is Keycloak or GitHub or some OpenID identity provider, you'll then be able to tie that into Identity Manager. And picture this: you could, in the next release or two, full production support, you'll be able to log into your Linux systems with, say, your GitHub ID. That's really cool. If you ask me, one less password to rotate every 3 to 6 months. But keep in mind that is Tech Preview, and we'll talk about what that means a little bit later on in the presentation. Workloads. So one of the biggest boons that we've seen in the infrastructure space is is partnering with organizations that want their tools to run on a certified, reliable platform like Red Hat Enterprise Linux. One of our biggest partnerships, and we've kind of doubled down with SAP this year, they are a platinum partner, is SAP Workloads on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So they had a big press release earlier in the year, and we've partnered with them quite heavily. And so for RHEL 9.3, we've got on-demand marketplace offers for RHEL for SAP, which means you can go out to your favorite marketplace, most of them anyway, and deploy RHEL for SAP. And as Shantanu has, please feel free to put your questions in chat. I've got a couple of folks hanging out with us to answer questions in the chat. And then, as I mentioned, I'll circle back to Q&A here a little bit later in the presentation. Also, SAP HANA now has support for SE Linux and Systemd, which means you've got one less excuse to just go in and say, disable SE Linux. This is not the SE Linux that you know from, say, RHEL 7 or CentOS Linux 7. SE Linux is much more intuitive, and it's much easier to configure now. So if you're running SAP HANA, guess what? Go in, test your systems, enable SE Linux, and get the security support that it offers. One of our other partners, who I'm really excited to be working with a little bit more in 2024, is Microsoft. And as someone who grew up in his technology career in the days of Red Hat versus Microsoft, I am so excited to have seen that relationship change directions. And now we work closely with Microsoft on SQL Server and Azure and just partnering with an incredible organization. That said, I'm really excited that our latest major versions, RHEL 8 and RHEL 9, are now supported with their latest version of SQL Server, which is 2022. So, and huge performance gains if you're running Microsoft SQL Server on RHEL. That's the beauty of the Linux kernel and all of its subsystems. So SQL Server 2022 is now supported on RHEL 8 and 9. Also, if you are a workstation user or you would like to become one, our workstation offering highlights highly intensive graphical workloads. So if you're doing animation, if you're doing confident or some kind of scientific computing, or if you're doing architectural diagrams, Red Hat Enterprise Linux for workstations is an awesome platform to use. You get all the stability of RHEL, plus you get GNOME and excellent graphical workload support. So a couple of notes here. Wayland sessions will be enabled by default. Xorg server is the Xorg server itself, not the protocol, but the server is deprecated in RHEL 9. And we'll talk about the definition of deprecated here a little bit later on. But Wayland sessions by default. And then also, we've got an offering out on AWS for RHEL 8 workstations. So think about it this way. If you've got a huge processing job, some kind of a rendering job or something that could take hours on your laptop or days on your desktop, you could go out to AWS and spin up a massive system for 20 minutes, and you'd only pay for that 20 minutes. Talking to some of my friends out in the animation world, a rendering job locally could require a desktop that has enough equipment that it runs around $20,000 US. Would you rather spend the $20,000 US for something that you're going to use all of its resources every now and then, or would you rather strictly pay for that RHEL for workstation just as long as you need it? You could spin up a huge system and only pay for the time that it's online. So awesome offering with AWS. We're looking at RHEL 9 there, as well as extending that offer out to other cloud platforms. And of course, RHEL for workstations is available for on-prem deployment. All right. So my co-host for RHEL Presents is Brian Smith, and his ears are probably burning because we're going to talk about automation and management. So Red Hat Enterprise Linux Web Console. This has become let's call it a tie between the web console and the terminal as far as managing Red Hat Enterprise Linux systems. In fact, I'll explain why this is so important here in a little bit. But the web console just keeps getting better and better. I mean, in my opinion, it peaked last release when we added dark mode to the web console, but that's personal preference. But if you are using web console to troubleshoot an issue, you've got a server that's not responding, you've got an application that's really struggling to complete its tasks, we've improved the performance monitoring elements so that now you can see the top services consuming disk I/O. So you can see what's thrashing your disk much easier than ever before. Disk I/O, in my experience, has been one of those things that's really, really difficult to pin down. But now if you're using web console, you can actually sign in and and use our performance monitoring with Grafana underneath to actually watch that disk I/O and see what services are reading and writing to your disks. Also, support for Podman container health actions. We introduced this last release for Podman, and this release, it's now supported in Podman. What container health actions are is this basic logic to tell your system that if this container shows up as unhealthy, do these actions. And so you can have it start, stop, restart, or force stop a pod that's not in a healthy state. So as I recall, we invented computers and technology to make our lives easier. So here we go, trying to make the life of the sysadmin even easier. There's additional improvements, things like virtual machine management improvements. There's as well as managing RPM OS tree images. So if you're looking for that more immutable, I know that's not the right term, but if you're looking for a more immutable experience for your operating system, you can now help manage package updates for our RPM OS trees, starting with RHEL 9.3. So this won't be introduced for RHEL 8.9 to my knowledge. System roles. Now Brian's ears are really burning because system roles are probably his favorite topic, and I love this technology so much. If you're not familiar, Ansible Core works with RHEL system roles. They're based on open source upstreams called Linux system roles, and basically it's how do you define services, subsystems, security settings, um, for your server using nothing but like a 6 to 8 line Ansible playbook. So we've got new system roles we're introducing for PostgreSQL, systemd. So now you can manage systemd services using system roles, and the Keylime server. So we'll be covering Keylime more and more as the next couple of releases come out, as it's part of our remote attestation solution, helping that zero trust strategy that I know Red Hat and a lot of you are looking at right now. Um, and also a lot of enhancements to, say, the storage management role, the SQL Server role, KDump, and Podman. Now, I mentioned that it's like a 6 to 8 line Ansible playbook that you just run either on local systems or at scale. Look how easy this is. This is our brand new PostgreSQL system role, which basically means you can run this playbook and within minutes have an up and running PostgreSQL system ready to go, ready for you to import your tables or to associate a new database with an application. And all you had to do was define what systems you're targeting in the hosts. You've got the var section, variables, where you define what version. If there's an input file, you can bring in your own Postgres server configuration file, as well as even set passwords. And all you have to do is use roles and then call the Red Hat RHEL system roles PostgreSQL system role. So if you've been tinkering with Ansible Core, definitely take a look at system roles. I really like the PostgreSQL system role, and we've got a couple of others like Microsoft SQL Server, which you can even deploy HA clusters of SQL databases using nothing but a format like this. Granted, the Microsoft SQL Server one is a little bit more involved, but I mean, this is basically all you need to set up an entire service. I think we're up to 20, maybe even 30 different system roles now. So I tease Brian that I'm just waiting for my system role that manages all my system roles. All right, if you're a developer, or if you're someone who works on Linux very heavily, you get deep into kernel modules and whatnot. Of course, every single release, we try and refresh as many of those core libraries and languages as we can. And this release is no different. We've got support for Python 3.11, as well as a couple of workloads like PostgreSQL 15, Nginx 1.22, and so much more. Now, I can read off my screen here and tell you what each of these do, but I'm going to leave it to the experts. So if you go out to developers.redhat.com, they have an entire blog. And over the next few weeks, in fact, I think there's a couple of them live already. Over the next few weeks at developers.redhat, there are in-depth blog articles describing what each of these new versions do, some of the advantages, anything that's been deprecated. Also, developers.redhat is also the home of the Red Hat developer subscription for individuals. That's our individual and hobbyist offering. Which, oh, by the way, I have a slide for that. So if you're an individual or you're a tinkerer or you're an open source developer, you can get a number of RHEL you can enable a number of RHEL systems, virtual or physical, and be able to run those. They are self-supported, but it's definitely a great way to get your hands on RHEL and some of the add-ons and other services. And in fact, developer subscription for individuals also is supported with Red Hat Insights, so you can get a really good handle on what you can do with RHEL. You can spend a lot of time learning it, and even though I'm an employee here at Red Hat, I actually use my developer subscription for my home lab, just because I want to know exactly what folks in our community, just like you, are using. But that's for individuals. That's for non-corporate use. But we've got a solution for that as well. Red Hat developer subscription for teams. So if you really like your developer subscription for individuals, you can take this to your IT manager or your decision maker and say, I really want to migrate our non-production systems to RHEL, and guess what? It's a no-cost or low-cost option. It's no-cost self-support by default, but you can actually ask for a developer support subscription to go along with this, and that's a fairly low cost. And the reason why I'm so passionate about a developer for teams is that when I was when I was a systems administrator, I came from an organization that had CentOS Linux probably 6 and 7 at the time, and we used that in non-prod, but we used RHEL in production. Of course, we pay for production. We want that insurance policy, basically. But every so often, there would be something different about the way a package was built for CentOS Linux versus RHEL. There's sometimes issues with what modules were included in the kernel by default. And I've got to tell you, those were some of the hardest issues to identify and resolve. You basically have to try and reproduce the issue on both distributions. But now with the Red Hat developer subscription for teams, you don't need to do that anymore. If you run RHEL in production, you can run RHEL in non-production as well. So definitely talk to your account teams. If you don't have a rep yet, feel free to reach out to Red Hat Sales because we'd be more than happy to talk to you about developer subscription for teams. All right. So quick dive into a couple of offerings that are available, but highly valuable ones, I believe. Now, as much as our concept at an industry level is changing around edge, so are our product solutions. And in fact, with this release, we're introducing the Red Hat Device Edge, which is an interesting approach towards how do I deploy the workloads I need with the orchestration that I need for them. And if you're a Linux shop only, you can do that. If you are migrating towards containers or Kubernetes OpenShift, not a problem. You can actually mix in some MicroShift as well, which is a stripped down single node implementation of OpenShift. And either option, either combination, whatever your scale and percentage is, you can also include Ansible Automation Platform, which means you've got incredible versatility in how you configure, where you deploy. If you've got tens of thousands of edge nodes scattered across the country or the globe, you can manage it all with a single platform. So really excited to see where Red Hat Device Edge is heading. It provides a really nice balance between these projects are on Linux, these projects are in pods and need a container orchestrator. Now you can deploy all three side by side and really help understand what you're trying to accomplish with your move to edge. Speaking of containers, I'm really excited that Docker Hub now has UBI, Universal Base Images, which is basically our RHEL in a container, as a verified publisher. While some platforms have made that checkmark pay to play, Docker Hub has not, and Red Hat has partnered with Docker Hub so that our UBI images, which are freely distributable, are now verified publishing, are from a verified publisher on Docker Hub. We've also been doing enhancements to things like OpenJDK runtimes. So those images are a lot smaller because we all know that Java is very slim and very, very streamlined to begin with. No offense to my Java developers out there. We're also expanding our workloads in UBI containers. For instance, OpenSSL, Apache, and Nginx images are available through this release. Which makes it easier to deploy a HTTPS secured web server right from a container very, very easily. UBI images you can deploy on RHEL or on OpenShift, basically wherever you have a container runtime, preferably Podman you can deploy these images. Makes it very, very easy. And I believe we announced this last release, but it bears repeating that Podman containers and UBI now support SIG-store signature support. Yep, can't even say it again. So SIG-store signature support in the container tools runtime. So this basically means that you can sign your OCI compliant registries. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. That means that you can sign your images before you push them to an OCI compliant registry. Just like some of the other enhancements to RHEL 9.3, this also means that it is harder for someone to get in and tamper with your code because those images are signed. And if it comes back with anything other than a response to that signature, you'll get that red flag. So really, really great. So moving on to migrations. As we wrap up sort of the technical dive here. So migrations, that includes both migrating to RHEL and migrating up through the RHEL major version stack. And if you've got a if you've got a sysadmin New Year's resolution that you're starting to think about this one. Red Hat Enterprise Linux has been more and more standardized. It's been easier to do with a predictable late release cadence with 6-month minors and 3-year majors. And so we're really working on moving to a world where it's easy to less hard. Let's go with less hard, where it's less hard to upgrade between major versions. For years, we all had like 5-year life cycles on our hardware before 3 or 5, and then we'd send them back to the manufacturer secondhand, and then we'd buy all new ones, and that's when we do our major operating system updates. But so much of our workloads are virtual or in the cloud now, so we need to change the paradigm in which we do operating system upgrades. So if you think about it, over the years, RHEL 5, RHEL 6, RHEL 7, and into RHEL 8, there's typically a major shift, whether it was systemd or Podman away from Docker or the networking tool stack. For last several major versions, there was always basically a breaking change. I mean, how many of you had to do init script changes over to systemd and the changes to the boot process? I know I had a few systems that we had to do that, and ultimately we decided to rip and replace. And while that's completely valid nowadays, or even now, I'm really excited about Leap. Leap was released as kind of an MVP that we fully supported in RHEL 7. So it is very much possible to do an in-place upgrade for RHEL 7 to RHEL 8, but I'm really, really pushing that that you standardize on something like RHEL 8, because if you look at 7 and 8, other than a really, really new code base, one of the major changes was our predictable lifecycle. RHEL 9 is so much more like RHEL 8 than 8 was to 7, 7 was to 6, and so on. So if you get in that mindset of every 3 years or every 4 years, if you want to let it bake a little bit, you're going to use the Leap in-place upgrade tool in order to do those in-place upgrades. Over on the left, it's kind of an eye chart. I understand, so I won't go through it line by line, but you can see what version of RHEL 8 you're on and what version you'll be able to upgrade to in RHEL 9. So this is available as a one-off utility. You can install it on a RHEL 7 system or a RHEL 8 system, or you can do this in mass with Red Hat Insights tasks or with Red Hat Ansible automation platform. There's some tie-ins to Red Hat Satellite as well. And the nice thing is Red Hat is invested heavily in Leap, in our in-place upgrade tool, because it's already been decided that is the tool we're going forward with to RHEL 10. So imagine building a system with all the system roles, using Image Builder, having it like common criteria certified. You can have all these things ready and deploy it on RHEL 8. And then when you're ready to get off of 8, you can do an in-place upgrade to RHEL 9 and keep those well-built systems moving forward. And guess what? We have a predictable life cycle. So you'll know exactly when RHEL 10 will come out, and you can start planning your in-place upgrade to RHEL 10. No longer do you have to wait on hardware refresh cycles to also do an operating system upgrade. Now, before it pops up in chat, the question I always get asked is, I have a ton of RHEL 7 systems and I want to go to 9. Can Leap take me directly from 7 to 9? The short answer is no. The longer answer is kind of. And this isn't so much a technical limitation as it is a sanity check, which you'll have to do. And you can do this in one outage, or I guess I shouldn't say outage. You can do this in one maintenance window or over the course of 2. But the idea is that when you go from 7 to 8, you want to have a logical stopping off point to start up all your workloads, verify that your scripts work, verify that your workloads work, verify that excuse me, verify that nothing went wrong in your upgrade from 7 to 8, and then you can go from 8 to 9 and do the same process over. Validate everything works. In fact, we have an organization, and we're really hoping, if you're listening and you know who you are, we're hoping that they agree to a case study, because they're doing thousands of systems per week over the course of the next quarter or so, bringing thousands of RHEL 7 systems up to RHEL 8 and then to RHEL 9 in the same maintenance window. So I'm really excited to talk to them. Maybe we can get them on RHEL Presents or something for an interview, because this is a huge undertaking, but it's one that's well worth it. Would you rather bring your RHEL 7 systems up to 8 and then to 9, or would you have to rebuild everything from scratch? Both viable options. So I've tried my best to kind of cover both sides of that coin. Anyway, I've harped on in-place upgrades enough. I came to the marketing team because I was tired of being a sysadmin for 10-year-old systems that no one wanted to manage. But alas, one of the other migration tools that we have, and we're very proud of, is Convert to RHEL. Which means that people's 10-year-old CentOS Linux 7 systems can be converted to RHEL 7 systems. Don't tell Scott, he's in the chat. I'm giving him a hard time, but you can do an in-place conversion, and it's not as bad as it sounds, because all it's doing is taking the CentOS 7 science packages and converting them to RHEL 7 packages. Of course, you can install RHEL 7 systems, set up all the same users, all the same services, all the same workloads, and manually move your data over. That's entirely plausible. But if you can do that in place and save hours and hours and not have to duplicate your infrastructure, not have to duplicate the number of virtual machines that you're running during that migration process, so much the better. And so Convert to RHEL saw a ton of love this release, because much like Leap has a pre-upgrade assessment that'll tell you that there's these inhibitors that will prevent an in-place upgrade. Now Convert to RHEL has the same thing. There's a pre-conversion assessment that you can run as one-offs as part of a maintenance window, or preferably before, to know what roadblocks you're dealing with. And just like Leap, there are bulk pre-conversion assessments now, which means that you can use Red Hat Insights to scan, get this, all of your CentOS Linux 7 systems. Yes, Red Hat Insights. You can register your CentOS Linux 7 systems to Red Hat Insights and do this conversion analysis in bulk. Now, does that mean, I should clarify, does that mean that I can take my CentOS Linux 7 systems and get all the benefits of the 12 to 20 services that we now have for Red Hat for Red Hat Enterprise Linux on Insights? No. The only tool you'll have available is the bulk conversion pre-assessment. So you can target dozens or hundreds or thousands of systems and run this pre-conversion assessment report. Also in the new features bucket for Convert to RHEL is support for Rocky Linux and Alma Linux. They've established themselves as an alternative, but no offense to the hardworking engineers in both those organizations, but Red Hat has been at this RHEL has been at this for 20 years. Red Hat's been at this for 30 years. We've been around the block a few times, and our engineering team and our support teams and our consultants are amazing at supporting Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That's one of the reasons why we don't have multiple distribution support for things like Red Hat Satellite, because we know RHEL, we know Red Hat products, and we want it to stay where we know the most about our tools. So if you're in the crowd of CentOS Linux 7 was going end of life, and let's try out this Alma thing, uh, then decided that it just wasn't the same experience, or if you tried Rocky Linux and support wasn't what you're used to, now you can convert those systems directly to RHEL. And over on the left, again, I've got a matrix of if you're on this version and you're migrating to RHEL, these are the versions you can land on, with one minor note. And that is that if you've got CentOS Linux 8.5, um, that was the last version of CentOS Linux 8. You can do an in-place conversion to 8.5, but 8.5 is no longer a minor version that is supported. So you'll have to do to do a DNF update or a yum update to 8.6, which is an EUS version, or 8.8, or any minute now 8.9. So I'm really excited to see that we're getting more detail in that matrix. So you can do in-place conversions to more targets, and now with more distributions. So that's Oracle, CentOS Linux, Rocky, and Alma, and we've got we're keeping an eye on the community to see if there's any other targets that we need. Now, you may be saying, this sounds great, but I've got thousands of systems and I can't absorb that cost in one go. Well, if you're running on Azure or AWS, on-prem or virtual, I'm really excited to share that we have the Red Hat Enterprise Linux for third-party Linux migration offering with support for extended life cycles. I had to do that for basically an ad, and it took me probably 6 takes just to be able to say the offering name in one breath. But despite the complexity of the offering name, this is really cool because it allows you to convert CentOS Linux 7 systems to RHEL 7 and get you set up with a subscription for those RHEL 7 systems at a significantly discounted cost. Again, that's supported on on-prem virtual machines, AWS, and Azure. And I just had a conversation with the Google Cloud team a couple of weeks ago for an upcoming Red Hat Summit talk, which, by the way, CFPs close in 2 days. So I lost my train of thought there because I was trying to be pithy. But anyway, Azure, AWS, virtual and physical, and GCP, Google Cloud coming soon, I hope. They did say that a few of the major roadblocks had been resolved, so hopefully we'll see Google Cloud here in the near future. Now, that supports Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Of course, that includes the ability to register on Red Hat Insights. Of course, it includes the Convert to RHEL tool, but it also includes the high availability add-on, and you can get up to 4 years of ELS because, like we'll discuss in the next section, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 is on its way out of maintenance mode, maintenance support, and heading into end of life. So if you are coming to Red Hat, you will need ELS support, which is an add-on to your regular subscription. But if you do it through this third-party Linux migration offering, all of that comes at a very discounted rate. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the two probably most integral services and add-ons that align with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. The first is Satellite. 6.14 came out last week alongside of 9.3. And one of the nice things is you won't see any flashy charts. You won't see any demos or walkthroughs because 6.14 and probably the next couple of releases of Red Hat Satellite is all going to be focused on improving workflows. So Red Hat Satellite is very dependent on click-through wizards to establish content sources and registering systems and whatnot. So you'll see a lot of focus on improving those workflows, making menus less convoluted, making some of the configuration windows a little bit more intuitive, but also cleaning up a lot on the back end. We're modernizing the cron library, things like content management improvements, just trying to make it easier to interface with Red Hat Satellite. Also, Red Hat Insights. John Spinks and myself recently did a 10-episode mini-series on a lot of the new features in Red Hat Insights. So I want to point you there. There's a link in the slide, and I will try and figure out a way to make this slide deck available to everyone. I'm not sure if I can do that, but your sales teams definitely have access to this deck. So a lot of the things that we've seen over the last couple of quarters are pre-conversion analysis, the ability to execute in-place upgrades through Red Hat Insights, some security enhancements, including the ability to see system vulnerabilities with or without errata. Now, because this has been released, I need to give you a public service announcement, a little PSA about this, because being able to see system vulnerabilities that do not have errata, which basically a lot of those fall into the category of they're low impacts, so they won't get addressed by Red Hat engineering, means that you're going to see a lot more vulnerabilities on your system that won't be addressed. Now, Red Hat engineering and our security teams are very much dedicated to important and critical vulnerabilities. That's where all of our engineering remediation efforts live. So you may see that your systems come down with a whole lot more vulnerabilities with nothing to fix them. No need to fear. The process hasn't changed. Our dedication to fixing vulnerabilities hasn't changed, but now you've got more visibility into what exactly goes into your systems. Also, inventory groups. If you like your interfaces nice and organized now, if you've got 1,000 systems and they're mixed between web servers, database servers, and middleware and anything else, you can actually start to group your systems. And also, you can restrict access to those inventory groups based on RBAC, role-based access control, which means that if you give read permissions to your database team to go and see how their database servers are running, they'll only see their database servers. This is really, really, really helpful. And we'll see more improvements to this. I think they have about a monthly release cadence right now. So if you check out the Red Hat Insights blog at redhat.com, you'll see all of those features as they emerge. So a new section in the What's New deck. I'm really excited about this, and I promise we're getting close to the end. But we're going to talk about a couple of additional features and some deprecations and tech preview. First of all, wonders never cease, for after years, the joke is finally going to get laid to rest that Stratus will be in tech preview forever, because as of last week, a week ago today, Stratus is now generally available. Let there be claps and celebrations all over the globe. And this is one of the reasons why I was talking about how important Web Console is, because I want to get my hands on Stratus. I wanted to try it out. And I did this with Video and a couple of other solutions that have really easy to use integration with Web Console. And Stratus was one of those. Between the time that this feature was confirmed and GA, I didn't really have all the time I wanted to go in and really get to know the technology, but I didn't have to understand it beyond a conceptual level, because Stratus is already interfaced with Web Console. Of course, there's still the CLI, there's still APIs, and my guess, this is only a guess, is that at some point in the future we'll have a Stratus system role, so you can actually deploy it that way. Now, I haven't seen that on the roadmap, so don't start counting down days, but you can go into the Web Console, configure Stratus, and get the advantages of things like thin provisioning, snapshots, TPM support, all of these things, and it's really easy to set it up. I didn't even need the documentation to go into the Web Console and configure a Stratus pool, I think is what it's called. But if you're looking for ZFS on Red Hat, because of the way that the licensing is configured, Red Hat had to kind of engineer their own. And while Stratus is not feature parity with ZFS, there's a few areas where Stratus excels over ZFS. But really excited to see that finally coming to GA. It is an amazing platform to really help improve storage management on RHEL. Also, we've hinted at a couple of these, but there's a lot of things in tech preview, and I want to start bringing them to your all's attention. We spent a lot of time over the last 2 years or so really getting the foundation of our technology evangelism, if you will, in place. And so now that we've kind of got a good cadence with these new predictable release cycles, I want to start focusing a little bit more on what's to come, give you an idea of what's coming to future versions of RHEL. So here's a short list of things that are in tech preview. Now, tech preview means not intended for production use. There's no guarantee that a feature in tech preview will ever reach GA. In fact, a lot of people theorized that Stratus was going to be one of those features. No offense to the Stratus team. I've just got to have some fun at your all's expense. So don't use these in production, please. You never know when a feature is going to change or when it's going to be pulled and maybe reintroduced later on down the line. But it is a great place in a non-production environment to start trying out some of these new features. Things like built-in WireGuard VPN. So if you're familiar with OpenVPN and how painful that is to set up and configure and maintain, take a look at WireGuard. We've also got things like GIMP that's in tech preview, and I saw some chat about ARM. GNOME is now coming to 64-bit ARM architecture, as is virtualization. So a lot of advancements on the ARM front. But all these things plus more, the link is down below. I'll try and include them in the show notes. Give me about an hour or so after this presentation to kind of get all of those together. But I'll try and grab those links and include them in the show notes as well. All right, so deprecations. We've got cool new things coming, but with that, some older things need to be retired. So definition of a deprecation means that it is scheduled for removal at some point. For example, we've deprecated a few features in RHEL 9 with the intent on removing them in RHEL 10. But that doesn't mean that a deprecated feature or function isn't supported. In fact, anything that is deprecated in RHEL 9 still gets full support for the full lifecycle. I guess I should be careful with full support, but it gets support just like any other package for the full length of RHEL 9. So it still gets support for that 10-year lifecycle. It just won't be included in, say, RHEL 10 or RHEL 11. Some things, for example, network teams are deprecated in RHEL 9, and I believe that's targeted for removal in RHEL 10 because instead of configuring a team, you can just configure a bond and get a lot of the same performance gains. Things like GTK2, the Vert Manager has largely been replaced by the web console. Things like SCP, this is one I still struggle with. It's going to take a long time for me to retrain that muscle memory not to type SCP, but to type SFTP instead, as well as SHA-1. So this is only a partial list. These are some of the highlights. These are things that I picked out of the release notes that I felt would be valuable to a general audience. If you want to look more specifically and get additional features that are deprecated, hardware deprecations, I'll include in the show notes a link to the deprecated functionality in the release notes. And there'll be a link to the release notes as well. It's not a thrilling read. It's not a Brandon Sanderson page turner, but it's definitely worth skimming through the release notes, especially on the deprecation side, so that you don't get caught off guard. So product lifecycle. If you're here, if you're watching this, if you're and if you're if you're new to Red Hat, there's so many reasons to run RHEL, and I could spend an hour-long presentation just talking about why Red Hat Enterprise Linux is better for your sanity as a systems administrator, better for your investment if you're an IT manager. But I don't have an hour. I have about 13 minutes, and there's a couple of questions I'd like to address. So if you are a Red Hat customer, thank you so much. We really appreciate being a part of it, you being a part of our community. And if you're a regular on this channel, thank you very much for interacting with us. This is becoming more and more RHEL's primary platform of bringing a lot of this information to bear. So I mentioned deprecations and end of life and whatnot. There are so many things going to change. My buddy Richard Rios, who's hanging out in the chat, likes to call this Techmageddon 2024. It's not an official term, but it's catchy, and I think it'll catch on. But there are multiple platforms that are going to change between May 31st and June 30th of next year. So we've talked a little bit about Convert to RHEL and CentOS Linux 7. The end of life for CentOS Linux 7 is June 30th. Also, I brought this in here to point out the fact that we talked about CentOS Linux 8, but that CentOS Stream 8 is a completely different animal. That's going to go end of life on June 30th as well. And unfortunately, there is no in-place conversion method from Stream 8 to RHEL, so that will have to be a rip and replace. I've gotten asked a couple of times why there's not, and I can go into details offline. But CentOS Stream 8 and 9 and 10 and beyond are very, very different animals. They're upstream of RHEL versus CentOS Linux, which was downstream. So keep in mind CentOS Linux, in-place conversion. CentOS Stream, rip and replace. Also, if those aren't bad enough, then Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6, the first brand new about it since day one, RHEL major version that I ever encountered. My gosh, RHEL 6. I had plenty of RHEL 4 and 5, but RHEL 6 was the first brand spanking new distribution I got to support. Is going end of it's riding off into the sunset because the extended lifecycle support, the ELS offering, is going to expire on June 30th. And then RHEL 7 will take its place on July 1st. RHEL 7 is going end of maintenance and will soon require an ELS add-on. And then and then RHEL 8 is going to start its maintenance cycle. So it'll be 5 years old in the spring, and so it'll leave full support for maintenance support. But if you're looking for a platform that's not going to change for a bit because you're trying to get standardized, I highly encourage you to go to RHEL 9, because RHEL 9 is still in full support until May of 2027. And Richard Rios comments that summer vacations in 2024 are canceled while you address these issues. So yeah, if a visual reference will help, here's the life cycle for RHEL 8, 9, and beyond. As you can see, we've got full support. But RHEL 8 is getting ready to go into its 5-year maintenance support, so plenty of time left on RHEL 8. In fact, if you're new to the Red Hat ecosystem, wouldn't be a bad idea to move to RHEL 8 if you want that 5 years of stability to kind of get used to the ecosystem, get used to the tools, get used to interacting with supports and TAMs and whatnot. RHEL 8 is a great choice, but if you want a platform that's going to be around for quite some time without any major interruptions, RHEL 9, oh my gosh, our baby is almost 2 years old. So I'm really excited about that, because RHEL 9 was the first. RHEL 8 came out right before I joined Red Hat, but RHEL 9 I got to work on since before it was ever in alpha or beta. So also here's a quick chart that is available out on our lifecycle website. I reference that page all the time, but I grabbed this chart because it tells you what minor versions are supported for how long, which have support for EUS or extended EUS. So definitely good to keep that in mind. Maybe print it out at least for next summer and put it on your cue ball or frame it at home. With that brings us towards the end of our presentation, but I wanted to leave you with a couple of extra resources to use and to learn. Things like Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. If you're a regular on this channel, you know that Brian Smith and I host a show every other Wednesday. In fact, we'll be live later on today. I'm hoping I still have a voice. talking about event-driven infrastructure with Ansible. We'll bring back one of our guests, Mr. Nuno Martins, to talk about Ansible automation platform and how you can actually have alerts trigger actions so that you're not the one waking up at 2 a.m. to fix them. Also, Scott and Nate and producer Eric host Into the Terminal every Friday. And this Friday, we're talking about how to get your hands on the new versions of RHEL, whether it's 9.3, 8.9, or probably a quick look at Red Hat Image Builder. And then stay tuned in a couple of weeks because we're going to have an exciting, entertaining episode about how to use Linux to prank your coworkers. So we've only got a couple of shows on Into the Terminal left, and I think we've got one left in RHEL Presents after today. So we're getting close to that end of the year wind down. But just because there's less live content doesn't mean that there's not things for you to do. You can actually go to lab.redhat.com and for free try out Red Hat Enterprise Linux. You can learn different things like how to migrate in place, how to do in place upgrades, also things like how to use Image Builder, how to of course, I just drew a blank, but there's at least, I think, 30 some odd labs out there. In fact, our team had an intern over the summer who was a rock star and wrote a series of developer-focused, how do I get started with Python? How do I configure my RHEL system with this? Or getting your hands dirty with TensorFlow. So if you're interested in the development of AI, there's a lab on how to get started with TensorFlow, which is one of those things that are becoming more of a foundation of AI on Linux. So check out lab.redhat. It's a great tool to use. If you've got a lunch break, just take a few minutes to learn something new. It's got admin 101, developer 101, all the way up to some more advanced topics. But we usually target about 5 minutes for the 101 stuff, up to 15 minutes or so for some of the heavier things. So it's a great opportunity to just take a break and for free use somebody else's RHEL system to learn a few things about RHEL. Also, if you are a huge fan, if you love Red Hat Enterprise Linux as much as I do, you should check out our accelerators group. Go to red.ht/accelerators. They are our champion program. You get cool things like swag. You get in fact, most releases, you get to see this content before just about anybody else. And in turn, you provide us with some product feedback. You give us validation about new features, and you've got a voice at the table to tell us that, hey, you know, I've been a part of the Red Hat ecosystem for X number of years, and I really don't understand why this type of feature or why this line of thinking hasn't been introduced. So you definitely get a seat at the table. Not the high table for you John Wick fans, but definitely a seat at the table. red.ht/accelerators. With that said, I know this was a long 56 minutes listening to me ramble on, but there's a few places where you can get connected with us, and I just want to extend a personal thank you for joining us, for listening to the session, whether you caught it live or whether you caught it after the fact. Please like and subscribe to this content. Subscribe to the Red Hat Enterprise Linux YouTube channel because we're live a couple of times a week. We try to produce as many tech tips and product updates as we can. So if you hit that bell, you'll get notified anytime new content is available. But personally, just thank you so much for being a part of this, because this is our opportunity to share with you, and there's so many other things you could be doing, and so thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over, or I'll kind of switch gears, and we'll take some Q&A. I've got a little bit of time. I know we're at the top of the hour, but I've got a few extra minutes that I can stick around and answer any questions. So if there's any questions that haven't been addressed or that you haven't shared with us, put them in the chat now. In fact, one question that I saw around life cycles that I want to cover is RHEL 8.9 is the next to last minor release. So next spring we'll be releasing RHEL 8.10, and that will be the last minor release for RHEL 8. So it'll be RHEL 8.10 through its maintenance lifecycle and through ELS, through extended lifecycle support. So so through that time there won't be any new minor versions. And only fixes under certain conditions for RHEL 8.10. That's one of the nice things about a predictable lifecycle, is that we now know exactly how many minor versions, which ones will be supported for several years and which ones won't. Scott, if you're still around, if you want to copy paste any questions that I might have missed. Richard, right there, the only exception was RHEL 5.11, but that predates our current release cadence. So I don't know if that was targeted for 5.10 or if engineering just kind of decided, we'll do one more. All right. Not seeing any new questions pop up. I'm kind of skimming through. Looks like Q&A master Scott has handled a lot of it. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here, let you all get back to your day. But definitely tune back in here in a few hours. It's 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live with we'll be live here in a couple of hours on Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents. I'll of course be joined by Brian Smith and Nuno Martins to talk about Ansible automation platform and event-driven infrastructure, which kind of harkens back to my point about, didn't we make technology to make sysadmin lives easier, or everybody's lives easier? But now we don't have to do it at the cost of systems administrators. So thank you for joining us for this product announcement. As I said, we're going to try and get this to about every quarter or so, and we'll cover things like satellite, RHEL, maybe even an insights update. We're still kind of fleshing that out, but as you saw, we have a snazzy new intro video for it. So thank you all for joining us. And on behalf of the Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, I've been Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and I will see you all this afternoon. Thank you so much.